Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time you're watching this short masterclass on real estate. And today we're going to be talking about earnest money and really understanding uh, what it's for, how it works, where it goes, and answer any questions that you have about earnest money. It's one of those things that's involved with every real estate transaction. And it's important that you understand it if you're buying. Also, if you're selling, it's important that you would understand how that works when you receive an offer on your property. So, first thing we want to answer is we want to answer the question of what is it, and really what it is it's simply a deposit that goes to hold the contract in place when someone presents an offer to a seller. For their property. Of course, the offer includes your purchase price. It includes any other terms that you're talking about, dates and things like that. And one of those terms is the earnest money, so that's listed in the contract, and it lets it's an offer from the buyer to put a certain amount of deposit money down, and it's information for the seller that can be used in helping them determine when or if to accept that offer. So why is it needed? As as a buyer, you want to put that money down to really to let that seller know that you're serious about the deal, and you've got some skin in the game. If you were to just unresponsibly back out of the deal at the last minute, you can lose that deposit. There's a lot of rules and things in the contract that will guide the decision on losing it or not losing it if you do cancel that contract. But it kind of lets that seller know you're serious. And as a seller, it's needed, for you to be confident that this person is actually serious about purchasing your property. So it's a deposit. There's money involved. Uh, how much money is needed? How much should you put down as a deposit in your earnest money as your earnest money deposit? And there are some situations where something as little as a $500 earnest money deposit would be acceptable. I mean, technically and legally, there's no certain dollar amount that's required for the deposit. But we typically will recommend that the very bare bones minimum for any type of real estate transaction would be $1,000 earnest money deposit. And then second, and most important or most regularly, we recommend that you offer a deposit of 1% of the purchase price. So, for example, if you purchased a home for, or you're offering to purchase a home for 250,000, I would recommend that you would offer a $2,500 earnest money deposit. And one thing that's true about the deposit is the bigger that deposit is, the more skin you have in the game as a buyer. And from the seller side, the bigger that deposit is, the more that you believe that person buying the property actually has the means to do so. It takes cash to purchase a property. Even if you don't have a big down payment, there's closing costs, there's other fees and things that are involved in purchasing a piece of real estate. And that deposit lets a seller know that you're serious about it and you have the means, you have the ability to actually pull this off and actually close the deal, which is important to a seller. You don't want to get in the middle of a contract and then you've taken your property off the market. You're no longer looking for a buyer because you have a contract with someone to buy it. You don't want to get 2 or 3 weeks into that deal and then realize that it's not gonna work. So as a buyer, the bigger the deposit, the more attractive the deal will be to a seller, and it's not a huge factor, but it can be a huge factor if you're competing for an offer, with other offers. You might raise that earnest money deposit in order to be a little bit more attractive than a competing offer. If there's if there's not much competition for that particular property, then that's not as big of a deal. But it's something to consider when you're deciding how much earnest money deposit to put down. So okay, a few things. What's the process look like? Where does this money go? How do I lose it? How do I get it back? So typically, what you'll see with a real estate contract is inside the contract and the terms of the deal, it's going to state that earnest money is most of the time it's going to be deposited with a title company. So you'll, whatever county you're working in or wherever you're planning to, process the deal, have the closing. It's pretty standard that that money is held in their trust account. It doesn't go in their general operating fund, account where you can, where they're spending it, those kind of things. They just hold it on behalf of the contract. And then based on how that contract proceeds at the end, if everything goes as planned, that deposit will go toward your total cash to close, the money that you need to bring to closing as the buyer. So that's where that money goes. You don't get it back as a buyer. It applies toward the costs of your purchase. Now, what happens if the deal falls apart? For some reason, the contract is going to cancel, and what happens to that money? Can I lose it? Well, short answer is yes, you can. And the question, can I get it back? Well, yes, you can get it back. Also, it just depends on how that contract was written and the details of how it got canceled. So, if you, as the buyer, are within the rights and follow the rules of the contract, follow the language of the contract, and had a reasonable reason to cancel that contract, then that money will come back to you as the buyer more times than not. There are extenuating circumstances. I don't want to say 100% of the time it would come back to you, but 99+% of the time, if you cancel within the terms of the contract, there's going to be no problem getting that money back to you in just a few days after that cancellation. It does require signatures from all parties to agree where that money goes, and sometimes that can cause a problem if there's a disagreement. But more times than not, the big majority of the time, it's no problem to get it back. So can you lose it? Well, yes. If you do breach the contract, you break the terms of the contract as the buyer, then the seller has the right to retain that money at the end. Again, all parties have to agree based on the terms of the contract. And if there is disagreement, it can go into a process where it has to be, the lawyers have to be involved, and that's pretty rare where it gets to that situation. But if there's a contention within the contract, within the terms of the deal, and so there's disagreement on how we got to this cancellation, then most certainly it can go back to the seller, or go to the seller, possibly go back to the buyer, possibly end up in a fight with attorneys involved. And usually, if that's the case, the attorney's going to, the amount is not going to be worthwhile to spend money on an attorney, because then we're talking about losing even more money because of the cost that you have related to that attorney. So earnest money deposit, it goes into the trust company, or the trust account of the title company, and they just hold it. And then again, if the contract is executed just like it's supposed to, then that money goes toward the buyer's cost at closing. If it cancels for a legitimate reason, the money's going to come back to the buyer. If it cancels for a not legitimate reason and there's a breach contract, more times than not, it's going to go to the seller. And that's a little bit of security for the seller to you have skin in the game. And if you break contract, that seller does benefit from that a little bit. That happens occasionally, but most of the time, we get the deals across the finish line, and it's great. So any questions? Looks like we have, okay, how does it vary, based on the seller's market or a buyer's market? And I'll say, if you're in a seller's market, you're going to want, as a buyer, you're going to want your earnest money deposit to make your offer more attractive. So I would typically encourage a bigger earnest money deposit, or if you're asking for maybe a unique situation, you might increase that earnest money deposit to, again, let the seller know, hey, you're not just playing games here. You're really serious about this. I know many times when we've purchased property, small, even I think we purchased a property recently for less than $200,000, and we put up a pretty sizable, I think, a $5,000 earnest money deposit. Just not because we knew we were going to have that much money at closing, so we went ahead and put it in the deposit to really let that seller know, hey, we're not messing around here. We want to get this deal done as quickly as possible, and here's $5,000 to prove it. So if you can't do that, you can't do that. But if you can, it always makes sure your ability to get that deal awarded to you a little bit better when there's some competition. If it's a buyer's market and you're looking to you know make as good a deal as possible. You can maybe lower that down a little bit if you need to. But again, it's just gonna if you really want to purchase a property, the better the deposit, the better the offer looks to that seller. So it's really up to you as the buyer. It's your money, it's your decisions. As a real estate professional, we're going to help you through all those processes, and we'll guide the process. But we let you guys make all the decisions. It's your property, it's your money. We just want to educate you and equip you to make the best decisions possible. Oh, question again, can I lose it? You can lose it in the event that you breach the contract more times than not. That earnest money deposit will go to the seller and not be refunded to you. All right. Want to keep these quick and painless. So thank you for hanging out with us today, talking about earnest money. Next session coming up on March 27th. We're going to talk about comparative market data and competitive market data, and what are the differences between the two, and why it's important to look at both of those when you're preparing to sell your property. Thanks for coming in today, and we'll see you soon.